Yeah, I don't want to be nearly as artsy or necessarily as pretentious as to show a Perrier water bottle that you're drinking fancy water.
You mean a beautiful, refreshing Perrier with a splash of lime?
Yes, indeed. So, anyways, for the camera, would you like to say who you are and what your project
So
is?
do I say it to the camera or you?
Whatever.
Okay. I'm Chris Gibbs. I know you say what your project is, but I'm doing different shows in different fringes.
Okay.
From the point of view of your tour thing. This year I'm doing 5 different shows in 7 fringes, I think. Maybe 6.
Okay. What fringes are those? Can you
Okay,
remember?
so here we are at Montreal. I'm doing a show called The Further Adventures of Antoine Faval. Then in Toronto, I'm doing in my improv show the Carnegie Hall show, which will be fun. In a special sort of fringe run, we run every Wednesday. And Winnipeg, my first one-man show, Gibberish, because my surname is Gibbs. When I first came over, people would be like, that was the first show, and I'd be like, are you doing gibberish? I was like, no, gibberish. And they're like, oh, over here it's pronounced gibberish. And then I'm like, and in England, but my name is Gibbs. And then after a while, I just got bored, and so people were like, oh no, in England it's gibberish. And so people really would. I'd like to think that there are conversations people have had about, oh, you know, in England, that's actually pronounced gibberish because of me. And then in Calgary, hopefully Victoria, Vancouver, I'm doing Antoine Faval, which is the one that this is a sequel to. And then in Edmonton, I'll be doing Like Father, Like Son, Sorry, which is the newest one that I did last year in Toronto and Winnipeg, and then just now in Una. Any questions?
That seems rather convoluted.
And basically the reason I'm doing that is in each festival I'm doing whatever the show I haven't done there is. And it's funny because a lot of people last year they were like, oh, how can you do that? How can you do a different? And I suspect they may be thinking of real theatre, but for me it's like it's an hour and 15 minutes most of them, and they're all in there, and I do. If I forget anything, it's usually for the best, since it often comes out better, and I go, oh, I should have done it that way in the first place.
What inspired you to get into theater or theatrics?
Theater, it all began actually when I guess 2 things happened. One, I was studying computers at university, and I remember watching someone going, I will never care about this as much as you do. And then the particular course I was doing, you would study for 6 months and then work for 6 months. And I found I was turning up every day at like 10 to 11 and leaving at 3. So I'd gone from being a pretty good student at school to being like the worst employee. And clearly, and I remember this guy who was really nice, he was like, you're quite clever, but you really need to work. And I'm like, no, I think you've got the symptoms, but not the treatment. What I need to do is do something else. And then I saw this documentary about a guy becoming a stuntman. And that was like my earliest ever ambition to be a stuntman. And I had, the thing that they described was, they talked to this guy who ran like the stunt registry in England, and he said, a lot of people don't realize how much work it was to do it. And I was like, this life that this guy has, he's spending every day training in like martial arts, gymnastics, all these other things. And I'm like, that is what I would do to stay sane in a job that I hate. And it was going to Covent Garden that that's where I found, the stuntman thing was like a means to an end. In my mind, I didn't really understand how it all worked. It's a very British thing, apparently. I felt I was insulting any performer. If I had ever just said I want to be an actor, it would be an insult to anyone who'd ever been an actor. And also, I thought you have to do it since you're 2, and otherwise it's too late. In performing at Covent Garden, I sort of basically found the things that I wanted to do. So the stuntman thing kind of was like this weird little excuse. I tricked myself into, and it was like the first decision I'd ever made in life. Everything else was like, I'm good at maths, I go do computers. Like, there was nothing there. I'd never really thought about anything. So it was a big deal. And then a lot of the street performers I knew, they weren't what I thought they were. Like, they were people often coming from different backgrounds like me, some of them coming more from the acting background and then ending up on the street. And some just incredibly funny people that was the medium, that they had chosen. And that was a great sort of realization. And then from that, there were groups who would do slightly more theatrical street shows, and they had come to Canada and done the Fringe theatres. And so that recognition that you can be quite theatrical on the street, but of course you can be a lot more theatrical in the theatre, strangely enough, opened up this thing that Fringe theatre specifically would allow for performances. So that was great. And that kind of opened the door for the idea that theatre can just be a case of doing a show people like in a very simple setting. And we were talking about yesterday that very basic, because as a street performer, that was it. I do something you like, you give me money. Great, we're done. So it opened up this idea that theatre can be that. So that's kind of like, I've come to theatre via the Fringe, not the other way around.
Yeah.
None of my shows fit anywhere else. Like they're exactly what they are. And it's always been that way. Like you would only see what I do in the Fringe, and I do other things, and every now and then I'm on TV, and you're like, and I'm sure people wouldn't even notice me, or whatever. But it's only this kind of small scale. It's what I find funny, and hopefully it overlaps with what you find funny, and we have a great time. And it's as simple as that. And because it's so cheap, it's free.
Yeah.
It's because it's cheap. It's freeing, liberal.
Where can people go to find out more about your shows?
Oh.
Festival website? Do you have a website?
I have a website, chrisgibbs.ca. I'm a proud Canadian.
Really?
.com was taken by a British guy.
That's weird.
In conclusion, what is art?